I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, the business community weighs in on the controversy surrounding San Diego Mayor Bob Filner, and City Attorney gives the okay to two separate efforts to recall him, but they may not be separate for very long.
And I'm Peggy Pico. City Attorney Jan Goldsmith joins me for an in-depth look at who's liable for the mayor's behavior, legal defense, and more. Then, what the arrest of Mexico's most feared drug cartel leader means in the drug war on both sides of the border.
Also tonight, Encinitas schools get more money to expand their controversial yoga program. And we continue our look at the expansion of San Diego International Airport. Tonight, we'll show you the new artwork in the upgraded Terminal 2. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hello, good evening. Thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with several developments in the controversy surrounding San Diego Mayor Bob Filner. A federation of business leaders have now joined calls for Filner's resignation, including former Mayor Jerry Sanders, who is now CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. Sanders says Filner needs to go, and the city attorney's office has weighed in on two recall drives underway. First, we begin with the business leaders. The San Diego Business Leadership Alliance is urging the mayor to step down. Joining us from the News Center is KPBS Senior News Editor Mark Sauer. Mark, why is the action taken by this group so important?
We've heard from 8 women about specific allegations in the 3+ weeks since this sexual harassment scandal broke, but the business community had been virtually silent. Not anymore. The Leadership Alliance represents establishment leaders from across San Diego's business spectrum.
And what did they specifically say today?
These business leaders say Mayor Filner has brought ridicule upon San Diego nationally. His ongoing harassment scandal is tainting the city's image, and it's bad for business and bad for job growth.
So we're hearing from business. What about labor?
I contacted the San Diego Imperial County Labor Council this afternoon to see if they're changing their stand, but I was told the July 18th statement by Secretary-Treasurer Richard Barrera still stands. They aren't asking Filner to resign, but want the administrative and legal processes to play out.
KPBS Senior News Editor Mark Sauer. Former Mayor Jerry Sanders says it's absolutely ridiculous for Filner's lawyer to claim the city is liable in his sexual harassment suit. Now, the claim came in a letter from attorney Michael Berger to the city attorney. Berger claims Filner's sexual harassment training was canceled by the city trainer, but the city's former chief operating officer, Jay Goldstone, told Voice of San Diego the training was canceled by the mayor's office because Filner didn't have time for it. Today, Sanders told KPBS the training is an online course taking 2 hours. He says he did it himself as mayor every 2 years.
You know, at this stage in his career, I'm not sure that he can blame anybody but himself for the problems that he's got. I think he should resign, but I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't care how we get him out. I don't care if it's a recall or a resignation, but this city's paralyzed right now. People have allowed this behavior to continue for a long time with this specific individual. And I think that men are going to be stepping up, and I think that we do need to speak on behalf of the women who are victimized. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again, and I think that's what's happening now. As a former police chief, you know, I've seen cases where it's very hard for women to come out. I've seen how they're re-victimized through a court process where they're villainized in some cases or marginalized in other cases, and that's simply not going to happen this time around.
Sanders also praised the women who have come forward. One of them was his first chief operating officer. Now, the city attorney's office has cleared up confusion about two separate recall efforts. Both can collect signatures, but only one can make it to the ballot. The backers of the two efforts will make an announcement tomorrow. Our media partner 10 News reports Stamp Corbin and Michael Palomari are expected to join forces in a single drive to recall the mayor. Palomari is a land use consultant, and Corbin is publisher of San Diego LGBT Weekly. And today, on his website, Corbin wrote, quote, "I will ensure that the citizens are in charge of the recall. That is what the referendum and recall process should be about, nothing else." The competing recalls pose just one of the legal questions facing the city. Tonight, San Diego's city attorney joins Peggy Pico to give us the latest on what the city is doing in response to the claims against the mayor.
We're learning more about what's going on behind the scenes in the investigation into sexual harassment claims against San Diego Mayor Bob Filner. 2 emails recently released shed some light on the issue. San Diego City Attorney Jan Goldsmith joins me with the details. Jan, welcome back.
It's a pleasure.
On Monday, an email was sent to you by the mayor's attorney, Harvey Berger, that states the city is liable because it didn't provide sexual harassment training to Mayor Filner. What is your response to that statement?
No, that's nonsense. But Harvey Berger's a good lawyer and he needs to advocate for his client. Whether the mayor chose to follow the requirement of harassment training is really irrelevant. The city can be held liable for his actions. We know that because he's an employee, and we understand that. So in a trial, we may be held liable if he's culpable. But that's why we filed a cross-complaint against the mayor, saying that if we have to pay money, we want reimbursement from you.
From what I got from Mr. Berger's letter was basically that, hey, look, you're required as an employer to provide sexual harassment training. Was that training provided to your city employees, to elected officials? How do you typically do that?
Well, it's usually the supervisor. For me, my assistant made sure that I got online and did my training and finished it and got a certificate. Now, the mayor has a chief of staff. That's the chief of staff's responsibility. As I understand it, the mayor's office decided they didn't want to do that. The ramifications of that does not mean that the city then is responsible to Mayor Filner to pay his attorney's fees for inappropriate conduct. There's no, that's why I say it's really irrelevant.
The harassment training was offered, wasn't taken.
Exactly, but it really doesn't make any difference on the case. You can't engage in sexual harassment. The city has a zero tolerance policy. That's state law. You're presumed to know that. The training would help you probably focus on that. I'm not sure it would have helped prevent these situations, but you know, from the standpoint if he doesn't want to do it, it doesn't mean we're on the hook for his attorney's fees.
Okay, let's move forward and talk about the directive stating that the mayor cannot be alone with any woman. I want to start with a statement from his chief of staff, Lee Burdick.
You said that the city attorney is the one who imposed this new policy that the mayor would not meet alone with any female constituents. The fact is, the mayor and I together developed that policy. We felt that it was a reasonable and prudent business practice in light of the allegations that were being leveled against him. And we put forth that policy because we felt it protected both the mayor and the citizens of San Diego, ensuring them that city business was being conducted with the highest level of integrity.
Now, Lee Burdick didn't respond to our request in regards for an interview for her statement on that. What is your response to that? She's saying we put this into effect, and I thought your office did.
Well, I'll tell you what happened, and she does have some of her facts wrong. Shortly after the Donna Fry press conference with the 2 attorneys, we felt we were on notice of the claim of a modus operandi that would have the mayor get women alone in his office and do things. Now, under state law, the city as an employer is required to take reasonable temporary measures to protect employees even before an accusation is proven true. So we know we had an obligation to do something. Within minutes of that press conference, I was on the phone to the chief operating officer and to the chief of police and asked for that policy. Then I dealt with Mayor Filner's lawyer, Harvey Berger, and they agreed. Now, Harvey Berger sent me a letter, which I believe you asked for, a copy, in which he said that the mayor did not think it was appropriate.
Right, he asked to have it rescinded if the investigation didn't prove.
But they agreed to go along with it. Now, that part is not true, but it's kind of petty who said what to who. I don't really care. The policy, though, the part about it being in the city's best interest and the mayor's best interest is true. It doesn't acknowledge culpability, but it protects against a he said, she said type situation, too.
Let me go a little further with that. Yeah. Who does it specifically cover? Constituents, employees, every single woman in San Diego?
Well, the MO was broader than just a few employees, and we have to meet what we're aware of, and this is very, very broad. The policy, I can't make law in San Diego, so it's not a law. If he violates it, he's violating his own policy that he agreed to. But it's supposed to be enforced by the Chief of Staff. The Chief of Police has made for certain commitments that, to the best that they can. But it really is up to the Mayor's office to ensure that they do what's right in connection with this policy. I can't create law. It's not a violation of the law.
Okay. To your knowledge right now, tonight, have any other women come forward with allegations besides who we've heard from?
Well, I can't discuss that. I'm sorry, but because we are investigating and we have agencies investigating that we're in touch with, so I just can't discuss it.
Okay. The mayor leaves for intensive behavioral therapy for about 2 weeks, I understand, to an undisclosed location. People have been asking this. Is he required to, in any level, to let City Hall know his whereabouts, since he said he's going to be conducting city business during his time away?
Nothing in the law that requires him to tell us. Now, there are a few things. He's scheduled for his deposition on August 9, but he's leaving apparently on August 5. We'll see what happens there. He's under a subpoena, which is a court order. We'll work with Harvey Berger on that, his lawyer. But we don't know where he's going or if what he says is true. I don't know.
Okay. I want to let folks know that there's an interactive timeline of events and documents, and you can find that on our website, kpbs.org. You can just click on the Filner files. City Attorney Jan Goldsmith, thank you so much for this update.
It's a pleasure. Anytime.
Mayor Filner has also been facing questions about a trip to France in June, and even though he's paying back more than $9,000 to the group that originally paid part of his expenses, the city is still on the hook for more than $20 grand for his security detail. Councilman Kevin Faulkner says the cost doesn't add up, and as chair of the audit committee, he plans to keep pushing for answers. Filner traveled to Paris to attend an annual rally at the National Council of Resistance of Iran. He said the trip would also help bring jobs to San Diego. So what happens next for the mayor and the city? As we mentioned earlier, tomorrow we'll find out what the leaders of the two separate recall efforts have worked out. And on Monday, Mayor Filner is scheduled to go into therapy as City Council takes a month-long recess. Filner's therapy is scheduled to end on August 16th, and backers of the recall can start collecting signatures on Sunday, August 18th. They have to collect over 100,000 signatures by the 26th of September. And during their signature drive, Council will return from its recess. If the recall succeeds, Council will have to schedule an election. Of course, you can find all of our ongoing coverage of this story online at kpbs.org/news/Filner. Some encouraging news tonight about San Diego's pension fund, a gain of 13.4% last fiscal year. It's a big improvement over the previous year when the return was less than 1%. The fund's return on investment is one factor in determining how much the city has to pay into the fund next year. A North County school district is expanding its controversial yoga program for students. Encinitas Union School District received a $1.4 million grant to add more yoga instructors. Some parents sued the district, saying it violated their freedom of religion and promoted an Eastern philosophy, but last month a judge ruled against them. The grant will increase the number of teachers from 10 to 18 at the district's 9 campuses. Governor Jerry Brown's approval rating is at a record high, 54%. But only 44% of likely voters approve of how Brown has handled the climate change issue. The survey comes from the Public Policy Institute of California. Brown hasn't said whether he'll run for re-election next year, but he has more than $10 million in his campaign fund. One of Mexico's deadliest and most feared drug cartel leaders was recently arrested. Earlier today, Peggy Pico found out what the arrest says about the country's drug war strategy.
Following the arrest of feared Zeta drug cartel leader Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, questions persist about Mexico President Enrique Peña Nieto's strategy in the country's violent drug war. Here with unique insight on the issue is Ricardo Ainsley, University of Texas professor, psychologist, and author of the book, The Flight to Save Juarez, Life in the Heart of Mexico's Drug War. Welcome.
Thank you, Peggy. Glad to be here.
Let's start with this high-profile arrest. What does it say to you about Mexico's new strategy in this drug war?
Well, President Peña Nieto has tried to move away from the kingpin strategy of his predecessor, which was take down the heads of the cartel leaders as a way of trying to reduce the violence. That strategy did not yield good results in terms of reducing violence. Peña Nieto, lots of
violence ensued because of that.
Absolutely. So people thought he was going to take a different direction. Actually, I think what happens here is that we see that that strategy can't be set aside entirely. I mean, you have the head man of the most feared cartel in Mexico in your sights. You have to act.
Would you say that the kingpin strategy is working then?
I'd say that the kingpin strategy is unavoidable, at least in part. The problem is that there are other issues that doesn't take care of. These cartels are actually groups of organized crime groups, and you take down one person and there's 5, 10 people wanting to take that slot.
Okay. Trevino Morales says he was monitored by U.S. Immigration and Customs by a drone from them. What is your opinion on using drones along the border or even across the border?
Well, I think the issue is that the cooperation between U.S. intelligence and Mexican authorities, that's the critical issue, whether you're using drones or informants or communications interceptions or whatever. That's the critical issue. And I think truly, because both countries have a stake in what's going on, you're not going to be able to remove that. And actually, a lot of the kingpin arrests or takedowns have been related to U.S. intelligence input. So
including this one, I understand.
Absolutely.
There was a lot of information going back and forth. Let's move on to your book. You take a closer look at how the drug war affects everyday people on both sides of the border. How did you get to this very personal perspective?
Well, I'm from Mexico originally, but Juarez, when I started doing my work on this book, was the epicenter of the drug war. They have the most violent city in the Americas at the time, some people said in the world, 11,000 people killed in Juarez in the span of 6 years. That's a lot of deaths, a lot of victims. And the Mexican government deployed about a quarter of its troops, 20 to 25% of its troops and federal police to Juarez. So it was the battleground, the ground zero for the drug war. And that's what brought me to Juarez. I wanted to know what's going on, how does this really work? I mean, we are all familiar with the war between the cartels scenario, but really what's taking place on the ground and how is this affecting people?
And specifically, you were looking at human rights activists, right? The mistress of somebody in the drug cartel. You got to some very specific people.
Right. The 4 main characters in the book are the mayor of Juarez at the time, a human rights activist who was under constant death threats, as was the mayor, I might say, the mistress of a mid-level cartel, Juarez cartel operative. He moved about 50 to 70 kilos of cocaine every 2 weeks across the border. And then lastly, a Juarez journalist. You know, the journalists in Mexico are highly vulnerable. Many of them have been killed.
Yes, and there and throughout Mexico and the border cities, certainly. You're a psychologist. Did being a clinician help you get some of these sort of raw answers?
You know, I think because I do see patients on a regular basis, I think that style of engaging people, especially when you're not just in and out, but you come repeatedly. It took me about 2 years of going into Juarez on a regular basis to kind of develop relationships. I think that opened up a lot of doors.
Okay, and I want to let people know they can hear a lot more from you. Professor and author Ainsley will speak more about lessons from Mexico's drug war tonight at the Institute of Americas, and again Saturday afternoon at the Barnes & Noble in Encinitas. For details, you can go to our website, kpbs.org. Ricardo Ainsley, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you, Peggy. It was a pleasure.
I'm Jeffrey Brown. On the next NewsHour, Judy Woodruff talks with 2 former NSA whistleblowers who say the government gathers a lot more intelligence on Americans than it's let on. That's Thursday on the PBS NewsHour.
The $1 billion expansion of San Diego International Airport, called the Green Build, will open on August 13th. It's the largest construction effort in the airport's history. Adorning the new gates and food court will be carefully chosen artwork. KPBS culture reporter Angela Carone gives us a preview of what you can expect to see.
Being in an airport can be a stressful chore. You're either moving from one place to another or waiting, finding ways to occupy your time.
I think since 9/11, just the idea of travel has changed so much. I can't walk you as my friend to the gate, but I think the art kind of mitigates that experience. It creates a calming distraction.
Constance White manages the airport's public art collection. Whenever there's new construction at the airport, 2% of the budget goes to art. 10 new gates and a food court are set to officially open to the public in just a few weeks, and there will be art in all of them. Like this piece, called The Journey.
So this light ribbon was commissioned from an artist named Jim Campbell, who is based out of San Francisco. It's comprised of approximately 38,000 LED light pendants.
Shadows of birds move through the lights. The airport floors become a reflective surface. Right now, the journey is 700 feet long, but representatives from the artist's studio are here installing the rest of the light ribbon, which will finish at 1,000 feet. The LED lights will cascade down this wall. Over in the new food court, construction is just winding up. That's where Canadian artist Stuart Keeler has suspended his piece, called Taxonomy of a Cloud.
So Stuart just would sit, he would come to San Diego and sit and look at the sky, look at the clouds, and there's a particular type of cloud formation that happens in Mediterranean environments, and it's called a lattice cloud.
At the center of the piece are strands of Swarovski crystals. The 35,000 crystals will capture and reflect light.
So the artist was thinking light and air, and it's so special in San Diego, and people are mesmerized just by the environment and the atmosphere here. How can he make that a physical experience for people, right?
San Diego artist Joan Irving's painted glass work has been in the airport collection for years. For the expansion, it was moved to a prominent spot at the end of Terminal 2.
And it really does bring your eye through the large, expansive space and really calls your attention to just the sunshine that comes through and floods the area with all the light and all of the color that she's created in the work.
There are a total of 10 new pieces of art placed in the expanded areas. The budget totals $6 million, which is funded through airport user fees. There's even art in the unlikeliest of places, like bathroom entrances. Rhode Island artist Eric Carlson has created a series of video mosaics that respond to movement.
I wanted to create an artwork that had a sense of reveal to it. And I chose to work with it's called smart glass. It's glass that changes from opaque to clear, so as someone approaches the piece, the image opens up. So when you first see it, it's obscured.
Carlson chose iconic San Diego scenes to film.
Well, surfing obviously drew my attention, and I'm not a surfer at all, and I had never filmed surfers before, so I wasn't sure how I was going to approach it. So I went to some of the beaches that were recommended to me and just started off watching what was going on, and then I went out on one of the piers where I was parallel to where the surfers were waiting to catch the waves, and I immediately noticed this really interesting back and forth where the waves were coming in, the surfers were paddling out, and then every once in a while one would come in. But it was a very interesting sort of rhythm that was developed. I think in some way the artwork represents what it's like in a compressed way for a visitor or maybe a someone who recently moved here, where the process of discovering these details about San Diego.
In between the restrooms with Carlson's pieces is a different kind of bathroom. The fire hydrant has made this a popular photo op for passengers. It's just one more visual surprise among all the artwork that passengers will discover in the newly expanded airport. Angela Carone, KPBS News.
Well, if you like today's weather, more of the same on tap for tomorrow. 70s along the coast And there is still a warning for dangerous rip currents until 9 tonight along the coast. Low 80s, plenty of sunshine for the inland valleys and for the mountains as well, where it will be partly cloudy tomorrow, sunny and hot in the desert. Recapping tonight's top stories, there are several new developments in the controversy surrounding Mayor Bob Filner. A federation of San Diego business leaders has now joined the call for Filner's resignation. It was a unanimous vote by the Business Leadership Alliance. Former Mayor Jerry Sanders is part of the group. He's CEO of Chamber of Commerce, and he is also calling for Filner to step down. And the city attorney's office has weighed in on the 2 recall drives underway, saying both can collect signatures. However, only one can go on the ballot. The leaders of the drives will announce their next move tomorrow morning. And you can find tonight's stories and download the KPBS app, all on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Good night.